Alright, so today we're going to be working on the Hawaiian postcard. So first thing I want you to do is go to File and then Open and find the downloaded files, the zip file, the Hawaii zip file that you have. I saved mine to my desktop and I'm going to click on the one that says Start. So click Open and we start off with this pineapple. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my layers panel on the right hand side here. If your layers aren't showing up, you can go to Window and go down to Layers and turn that back on. So I'm going to select my layer 1, which is my pineapple layer. If it's not visible, you can click the icon, the eye icon right there to toggle the visibility. So each of these have are different layers and they have visibility. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to start reordering these a little bit. So remember, whenever you whenever you want, you can reorder a layer by just dragging it up until you see the blue line, then letting it go, and then you can drag it back down. Alright, so we're going to create a new layer. So I'm going to click New Layer, alright, and I'm going to name it Clouds. So I'm going to Clouds. Alright, once I have my layer, I'm going to drag it down right below pineapple and put it there. So we have clouds layer underneath the pineapple layer. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my foreground color. To get to your foreground color, you go all the way at the bottom of your tools panel and you see one up in the air, one below. The one up in the air is the foreground, the one behind, and below is the background color. So we're going to double click the foreground color and we're going to come over here to our values. So we have our lab colors, CMYK, and RGB. This is your hue, saturation, brightness, HSB. And what we're going to do is we're going to find for cyan, 58. We're going to type 19 for our magenta, 5 for our yellow, and 0 for our black value, or K, or key value. So it also gives you this number 66AB4, ABD4. If you were to copy this, you can always use this number and paste it in later on. Alright, so we have our layer order, we have our color, foreground color. If you ever want to switch those, you can hit X, and that toggles between your foreground and background color. So I hit X and it goes white at the top. If I hit X again, it's blue at the top. So that's your foreground, background color. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add clouds to this layer. And we're not going to add them by going on to Google and finding them. We're just going to go up here to Filter, and we're going to go down to Render, and we're going to add some clouds in. So see right here, it says Clouds, and we added those in. So you can, sometimes I use these clouds for smoke. I'll expand that layer and just make it really large by clicking on it, and then I can use this as a smoke layer. But for this one, I'm just going to leave it as how it is. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our pineapple layer, make sure it's visible. So we're going to play with our blend modes. So we have different blend modes. So these are all blend modes. So I'm going to set my pineapple layer, say duplicate layer. Alright, and I duplicated it. I could also drag this down to the new layer button and let go. That also duplicates it. And I'm going to set this layer to overlay. So overlay, and what that does is it's taking the color and making a little bit more contrast and a little bit brighter in some areas, so you can see the difference. So next thing I'm going to do after I do the overlay is I'm going to import a flower. So I'm going to go over here, so File, and I'm going to say Place Embedded, right? And I'm going to go to Flower 2, and I'm going to put that in there. So again, remember, when we're embedding things versus linking them, link is a smaller file, embedding is a higher file size, because what happens is the file is actually being placed into this document. When it's linked, it's just outside of the document, so it doesn't take up as much space. So I'm going to click check mark when I have it. I'll click on my move tool, which is the V key. So your move tool right there, and you can see right there it says V. So I click my V key and I'm going to put this on my page, and so I have one flower off the page, one flower on the page, and I'm gonna set it. So next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a saturation layer. So I want my saturation layer to just be on the layer, affect the layer underneath. I don't want it to affect everything. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a non-destructive layer. So the difference between destructive and non-destructive is destructive means you're using this menu up here, and if I do saturation up here, so I'm doing saturation up here, it affects just that, it's affecting just what I have selected, but it's also not creating a layer for it. So I did that up here and there's no layer. I also want to show you how to do it as just a layer. So I'm going to click on adjustments and I'm going to go to saturation right here. It should be a square with a two box square, and I'm going to change my saturation to 43.19.0. So I'm going to do 43.19 and I'm going to leave my last one at 0. Alright, now it affected the clouds and everything. So if we look at our layers, it's affecting everything underneath. What I want to do is I want to only affect this layer underneath. So there's two ways of doing that. I can hold down my Alt key and go in between the layers and then put my mouse in between the layers and it gives me this little symbol and click on it and that puts it just to the layer underneath. Or I can double click my symbol again and there's a little button right here at the bottom of my layers, my properties panel. I can click that and that also does the same thing, attaches it to the layer underneath. You know it's attached by the arrow pointing downward to the layer. Alright, so now I'm looking for my Hawaii layer. So I'm going through my layers and I see my Hawaii layer. I want to turn on the visibility, so I come over here, turn it on, and I'm going to select my Hawaii layer with my magic wand tool. So remember, your magic wand tool is only for solid colors. So since this is all white, I can select them. So I'm going to click the H first. And if I hold down my shift key, I can select more than one letter and keep the other selections on the screen. Alright, that's one way of doing it. A quicker way, which I often do, is I select my one color, then I right click and say similar. Alright, so that selects all the other of that color. You gotta be careful when you're doing that though, because if you have some other white somewhere else on the page, it would have selected that as well. So now I'm looking for my gradient tool. So I go over to my toolbar and I'm gonna go down here to gradient. I think it's under this gradient tool, so that's 13 tools down. You can also just hit your G button. So to use this gradient, I'm gonna have to add a gradient color. So I'm gonna go up here to my gradient editor. I just clicked on it. I'll do it again. I just clicked on the gradient at the top of the screen in my options bar, and it brings up the gradient editor. I want to go from foreground to transparent. So this one says foreground to background. This one says black to white. And if you look in the middle here, it says foreground to transparent. So if you look down here, I click on this. If I click on this, it says location 100%, smoothness 100%. But if I double click it, you can still see that blue right there. So if I change this top one to opacity 100%, you can actually see the blue that's there. The blue actually goes all the way through, but they have the opacity set to 0. So I'm gonna go back. So to do that again, I just single clicked on it and changed the opacity. So we're gonna change our foreground color. So I'm gonna click the bottom one. If you look there, it says color stop. And I'm gonna come down here, click on the color, and I'm gonna set this color to. Alright, so we're gonna select our color, our gradient color. So 58, and we're gonna change this to, well, actually it's gonna be 0, 0, 53, and 100. And we're gonna leave black K as 0. So click OK, and I'm just gonna, from the bottom of my W to the top of my W, I'm gonna drag upward. Right, so that gives me my gradient. Actually, mine came out a little bit. Make sure I get my colors right. So this color right here, use background color. I want it to fade to white. So orange to white, and make this 0%. Click again. All right, so I have my colors. I'm gonna deselect that. Command D or Control D to deselect. And next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add a 4 pixel stroke around it. So I'm going to click on my Hawaii layer. I'm going to come down to FX. I'm going to click on stroke. And with my stroke selected, I'm going to change this to 4 pixels. So 4. And I'm going to keep it as outside. And I'm going to change my blend mode. Actually, I'm going to leave my blend mode. And I'm going to change my color to, I'm going to use my eyedropper actually. So I'm going to come over here off my page. And I'm going to click a green of my pineapple. Somewhere that I like, somewhere kind of bright. That was a nice green. And click OK. Alright, so next thing I'm going to do, without leaving this window, I'm going to add a drop shadow. So I'm going to come down here to drop shadow. And I'm going to change my shadow to 75%. 75. So right there, 75. Oh, actually, I'm going to change my distance to 5, 30, 10. Right, and click OK. Alright, so now I have a little bit of a drop shadow. You can turn that on and off to see what it looks like. Alright, so we're going to find our flower layer next. So click on flower, and I don't have my flower layer on, so I'm going to click that back on. So click on my flower layer, and I'm going to go to my effects one more time. This time I'm going to add a satin color. So I'm going to come down here, click satin, and I'm going to come over here, change my color to 488 0 and 0. Click OK. I'm going to change my contour. You can click on contour if you want. You can change it. You can bend it. I'm going to bend it a little bit so it's more of like a arc, and click OK. And I'm going to change my distance to 22 and my size to 14, right? And click OK. So that gives my petal a nice like satin effect or sateen effect, either one, right? And I'm gonna actually lower my effect. My opacity is a little bit strong on that. Oops, sorry, my satin layer. So I have an opacity of, let's do 25%. And click OK. Alright, so that just gives a nice smooth effect to our flower. And next thing we're going to do, we're going to go back to our file, go down to place embedded. We're going to find our photo. So this time I want to use the beach photo. The family photo is okay, but let's go to the beach photo. Click place. And I'm going to hold down my Alt key and my Shift key, or my Command and Shift key. Oops. I'm dragging it down. Shift key will keep it constrained. Alright, I drag it onto my page. Alright, click check mark when you're done. Use my move tool to position it where I want. I'm going to have it slightly overlapped, and I'm going to rotate it like this so it has a little bit nice rotation. Actually, I might do it the opposite rotation. I click check mark, and again we're going to add a stroke to it. So if you remember how to do the stroke, I'm going to click FX and go down to stroke, change this to white, click OK, and we're going to change our position to inside this time. And I want you to increase your point size to like 5 pixels or 8 pixels. That looks good, or 8, and then click OK. So that looks like a little photo that's on the page. So if you were on the beach, you'd be sitting on this chair. All right, that's it. So we have all of our layers. You can click these to collapse them, to collapse your effects. And we're going to add our postage stamps to it. So I click on my postage stamp. I'm going to drag that down, rotate it, maybe make it a little bit smaller by holding Shift. Control T is to transform. So Control T, that allows you to transform it. And I'm just going to put that across it, and that's it. We have our postcard. So click on File and save it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to merge the layers or flatten the layers. So we're going to go to Layers, Flatten Image, or you can just right click on the right hand side here, say Flatten Image. And we're going to save it as a JPEG to submit to Canvas. So save as JPEG, and it's in my Hawaii folder, and click save, and that's it.